Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call this Works Committee meeting to order. Are there any, roll call first. Thank you. I'm out of practice. Okay, we have quorum, which is fantastic. Now, are there any declarations of interest? Seeing and hearing none. Now, just a reminder, our policy states that all committee members should have their cameras on. So I think we've got one committee member without their camera on so far. Okay, and Councillor Cook, you were on and then you were off. So I think you hit your button one more time. And Councillor Nicholson, you were on and then now you're off again. Okay, well, as we work through the tech, we will continue. First is 3.1. This is the minutes from October the 2nd. Can I get a mover for that? Okay, so moved by Councillor Crawford, seconded by Councillor Yamada. Questions, comments, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. We are down to delegation. 6.1 is Linda Gasser. She's a Durham resident, talking about the correspondence 2024 WR7. You've got 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
You may want to pull your microphone up a little bit.
I didn't even notice that.
Thank you.
Good morning. So we're here today to talk about the throughput capacity increase. And this is the information that was presented in 2019. And I point you to the estimated savings that staff purported would be achieved with the throughput capacity increase. And at that time, they described this as a DYEC ECA administrative amendment. They really should have known that this would require an EA screening. So this is the footnote that goes with that table on the previous slide, and it describes the assumptions that they gave for what the operating fee would be in excess of 140,000 tons per year. They estimated other savings compared to landfill, and there's no specific figure for the power subsidy, but they assumed a power subsidy to subsidize the operating costs. So in the report, sections 3.4 and 3.12, staff respond to questions about the cost of the EA screening process, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the highlighted section is they say cost is irrelevant but not a primary factor for this decision. The financial impact would remain beneficial. The power purchase agreement will apply to power generated under the appropriate conditions, no details. And then they say overall from an operating perspective, the costs of the increased capacity are net positive. There is not a single number in their responses. And remember, the questions were asking about costs. So from Clarington's motion, they asked that staff reevaluate the 2019 assumptions about the capacity increase given the programs to capture additional organics from the garbage and the region's recent focus on waste reduction. So this is the staff response. The drivers for the capacity increase have remained the same. Durham Region requires waste disposal capacity to meet the needs of a growing population and reduce tonnage shipped to landfills, and the associated greenhouse gas emissions. Again, no details. So the 2023 Waste Management Report was released last Friday, and it shows that garbage tonnage is relatively flat, and there remain opportunities to improve organics capture. And in 2022, staff stated that only 61% of households place a green bin out for curbside selection. So there's obviously room for improvement. And as far as the GHG's life cycle analysis, staff continue to rely on an outdated supplement from the EA from July 2007 that is using estimates rather than the 8 years of operating data that staff would have. So here's a table from the 2023 report. You can see the waste generation per capita is going down, And then you can see the green bins generation rate. And then on the next slide, they did an audit for single family and for multi-res. And you can see the proportion of the waste materials described there. So in 2023, Durham was only 13,502 tons over the allocated capacity of 110,000. And this is prior to the enhanced green bin and the proposed source-separated organics collection to multi-residential. So as far as GHGs, Ontario still only has the 2021 data, but if you take a look, in 2021, actual emissions were total GHGs were 174,544, and compare this to the estimate of 182,000 for 160,000 tons. So at
You've got 30
140
seconds, just so you know.
Pardon me?
You've got 30 seconds, just so you know.
So from the intrinsic report, we see that health is not specifically addressed in the ESR. There's mischaracterizations about the 400,000 ton per year scenario. Health and ecological impacts are top concerns, and we describe these in our May 22nd letter, which was pulled from the CIP. A sample of the concerns from the reviewers at the time.
And you're out of time. Thank you very much. Councillor Yamada? Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Crawford. All in favor? Okay, that's carried.
Thank you very much. So the reviewers of the EA that was submitted in 2009, there was an original EA and then an amended EA. So they had comments. And, and the comments were from the regulatory, among many comments, I'm just giving a sample here from the regulatory toxicologist. So I'm just going to read part of this. However, outstanding issues identified by other MOE team members for the 400,000 ton scenario, such as emissions and deposition modeling, need to be resolved before SDB would be able to thoroughly assess the information. And then the EA got knocked down to 140, and the same toxicologist stated after that, the proponent indicated that the 400,000 ton per year scenario is no longer included in the final report and has committed to conduct a new environmental study to support any increased capacity of the facility beyond 140,000 tons. So there's also a very misleading statement about dioxins being extremely low compared to permit limits. This myth can only persist where source testing is infrequent or where testing is not conducted under other than normal operating conditions, and or where continuous sampling is either not conducted or not fully reported. Recall, Wendy and I told you this last meeting in October that the DYEC couldn't make it through the spring 2024 source tests 3 4-hour dioxin and furan test runs without a process upset, with testing that was paused during that upset period. In 2023,
You've got 10 seconds.
Oregon passed a bill requiring SEMS monitoring for a number of pollutants, including dioxins and furans. I ask that you please refer this report back to staff. Answers have not been provided to the questions submitted, and you need numbers about the costs. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the extension.
Okay, any questions?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to the delegate. Can you expand more about the cost issue?
Well, the only numbers we have about costs were what was provided in the 2019 report that was put before COW and then Council, saying that there would be estimated savings of possibly up to $2 million a year. And then when you go to the slide with the footnote, they say that beyond 140,000 tons, they estimated that the per ton rate would go down substantially. They estimated there would be power revenues. They estimated landfill fees. But we have not gotten any update since 2019 about costs. And remember, this was characterized as an ECA amendment, but it was actually an EA screening required, and that took 5 years. That cost some money.
So we need to see the costs from 2019 onward.
You need to see, they need to verify the assumptions at the time. Has anything changed? Things like the power subsidy and the operating fee, they're indexed to inflation in various ways. So inflation has been high. You would have heard from your works water staff that the cost of things like reagents has gone up dramatically. So you need a cost update. This is 5 years old, and we don't know if those assumptions hold. And then, of course, there were multiple studies required over the course of the EA.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from committee members? Okay, going to John Neal, who's a member of council. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I guess I could ask the delegate this, as well as I can ask staff later some questions. But in regards to the report, and there was an evaluation requested by Clarington Council at their May 27th motion, which states an evaluation of the Durham York Energy monitoring programs and emission control technologies, as well as the identification of improvements required to meet commitments in the EFW cases and host community agreement. Can you expand on that?
Just a second, just question to clerks. In our procedural bylaw, does that question, do you want to read off what it says in our procedural bylaw on that?
Sure. So through the chair, just for clarification, any questions to delegates shall be for seeking clarification or additional information, not to expand the scope of the delegate's remarks or for adding the member's own statement or position through the delegation.
So just on the asking them to expand on the delegation that already went over, I think we need to be careful of. Do you want to rephrase your question?
Yeah, in regards to the contracts that have been signed between the region and I guess it was in the past called Covanta, have those contracts been fulfilled or basically not?
Well, the full project agreement was never made public. There's a redacted version posted online, so we can't see what clauses might have been included, and again, we don't know if they're there, but might have been included to constrain monitoring in any way. But what's important to remember is commitments were made to Clarington to do a review of monitoring at any expansion. And this is not a physical expansion of the plant, but it's an expansion of the tonnage processed. So that was the commitment in the HCA to Clarington. It's important to note that the host community agreement with Clarington was signed before Durham signed the project agreement with Covanta. So if you make a contractual agreement with one party and then undertake an agreement with a third party that in some way potentially undermines what's in the HCA, that is a problem. But the most important issue is that staff did not provide in the EA any kind of evaluation of monitoring. They have just said flat out, no new monitoring required. And there's an obligation in the HCA to evaluate monitoring. So that's in Clause G of Clarington's motion, and that has not been responded to. And this council, because so many commitments were made to Durham residents as well as to council, should ensure that those commitments are adhered to, and that staff demonstrate that those commitments are adhered to. And if there is any deficiency, then that should be addressed. And this is certainly the time to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and further to this, my supplemental would be in regards to the meetings, like the energy from waste meetings and so on and so forth. Is there going to be in your delegation today? Did you mention? I might have missed it. When Clarington is going to get a direct response from the region in regards to any of these issues that you described?
So
Have you seen that?
I don't see a full response to the issues in Clarington's motion in report WR7.
Okay, I guess, and there'll be further questions to staff, I guess, in regards to that report, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, it was good. So we have a report here with multiple experts through Dr. Kyle, and that's later on the agenda. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I don't see any additional hands, so let's go on to our next delegation, which is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Which is Wendy Bracken, in regards to WR7 of the 2024 agenda, item 7.2. Go ahead, you got 5 minutes.
Good morning. I stand here gravely concerned with how this process to expand the garbage throughput to 160,000 tons per year has unfolded. There's a universe of information and beyond, here and beyond, including your own data, which is crying for and demands more scrutiny, more transparency, best available monitoring. But so much of what is before you today in Works Report 7 is scoped. It's scoped to a flaw ESR, which itself is scoped to examining only air impacts. And those air impacts are only looked at under ideal steady state conditions and don't include other than normal operating conditions, which occur often, and there's evidence of this at this facility, and when emissions can be much, much higher. WR7 is seriously inadequate. There are flaws in the ESR that have been brought forward and submitted and that remain unacknowledged and unaddressed. The health review is inadequate and flawed. There's a failure to address the totality of facts around DYEC's operational history around dioxin emissions. And there's a complete failure to fulfill obligations to Clarington to consider best available monitoring at the time of any expansion. Reading WR7 staff statements leads one to believe that the human health risk assessment was reviewed and that they responded to all submitted concerns in the responses they sent to the minister. Neither is true. Those responses sent to the minister mattered because the minister decided not to elevate to a full AEA based on the region's response. EA screening has the proponent self-assess potential risks. The region did not check off effects to land and health as potentially being negatively impacted by burning 20,000 tons more every year. That extra mass does not disappear. It is loaded to the environment, but they did not assess mass loading. They only checked off air. They did not consider health environment impacts via multiple pathways, including food, though numerous studies in the EA multi-pathway risk assessment, there were numerous issues identified in that multi-pathway assessment. They did not list the site-specific human health and ecological risk assessment as a study they considered when reviewing potential health and environment impacts. Not listed. Linda's already talked about this, how the ministry reviewers at the time of the EA and the regulatory toxicologist advised a new environmental study would be required if any expansion beyond 140 was made in the future. There's a major flaw with the intrinsic review. Regarding the ESR was scoped to air impacts only, they pronounced some merit, quote, since air quality has the largest potential impact on health, end quote. This is simply not true for all pollutants, especially for pollutants which accumulate and persist, like dioxins, whose major risk pathway is through food, not inhalation. Intrinsic relies heavily on the AQIA, the air assessment, limits evaluations to specific years, makes broad, unsupported conclusions like the congeners analysis but only for a brief set of data, a brief time period, and that's a problem. Dr. Copes' review also acknowledges the conclusion, quote, relies heavily on the results of the air dispersion modeling, which predicts no increase, end quote. But the fundamental flaws in the air quality assessment remain unacknowledged and unaddressed, including the eyebrow-raising conclusion that burning more every year results in lower air concentrations and attributed that to increased flow rate and stack temperature. But where did those flow rates and temperatures come from? Look at the table of data used. For the 140 case scenario, they used 2011, before construction, theoretical values for the flow rate and temperature It's absurd. They have actual 140K operating data for the 140K scenario, but didn't use it. But they did use it to prorate for the 160 scenario. It's obvious to any reasonable person the AQIA conclusions are based on unfair
You've got 30 seconds.
apples to oranges, 140 to 160K comparison. They mixed theoretical with operational data from different years to create an artificial 140 scenario that made the 160 case look good. I only have a few minutes, a few slides left, and I hope I can get 2 minutes. Thank you. There's been a failure to address the totality of facts around DYEC's operational history around dioxin, furan emissions, and monitoring, which point to the need for a precautionary approach and more monitoring. The multiple dioxins stack exceedances, the ambient air exceedance that occurred on a very calm day, that to our knowledge, this facility has never been source tested at other than normal operating conditions, though this facility has experienced numerous shutdowns and upset conditions, and it's well known dioxin emissions can be much higher, up to 1,000 times during other than normal operating conditions. Europe now requires incinerators to stack test during those conditions. That the most recent soils testing report, soil testing only conducted once every 3 years, shows dioxin concentrations at the down site more than double pre-DYEC levels and above what is predicted in the EA. That there's all of this years and months more of missing and invalidated AMESA data, and no underlying documents have never been provided. That is a red flag. And even when they just rely on those short dioxin source tests, they can't even make it through a source test. There have been operational issues requiring them to pause and piece together test periods. All point to the need for better monitoring, as is in the European best available techniques. It is egregious that Durham is still not conducting continuous emissions monitoring for total particulate matter. It should be doing it for mercury as well. 9 hours twice a year don't cut it.
You've got 10 seconds.
It should be. They should also be doing brominated dioxins and furans as Europe does, and they should be doing other than normal operating conditions monitoring as Europe requires. It's not
Okay, you're out of time.
It's not reasonable, and commitments are not being met for Clarington.
Okay, any questions from committee members? Councillor Yamada, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the delegate. Can you sort of clarify a little bit more in terms of the slide on the use of the theoretical information for the 2011 theoretical numbers for the 140,000 TPA scenario versus what looks to be 2018, 2022, 2020 numbers for the 160,000. Why do you think that would be the case?
Because that's what happened. And it wasn't evident until very late in the process, and even after the public comment period closed. Clarington's peer reviewer also had concerns with the parameters that were used in the air quality impact assessment. And they sent a letter to Clarington after the period had closed. And then it became very clear. I could never figure out what was happening, because when you burn more, I couldn't reconcile their numbers. What was in the ESR, it wasn't able. It was indeterminable where they were coming up with these things. But I have a copy of the ESDM from 2011, and that's where that data came from. They created an artificial 140 scenario. They cherry-picked some flow rate and temperature from 2011, which was theoretical. They mixed it with some actual source test data. And then in 160, just even looking at the flow rate, it's incredible. And the temperature, you're using it in the 160, but you didn't use it in 140, and it came from the 140. So Like, for instance, the flow rate, they took 140 and they multiplied it by a certain factor to get to 160, but then they weren't using that same data for the 140. It's a real problem. It's never been addressed. And, you know, all of these health risk assessments you're hearing about today, they're relying heavily, heavily on that air impact quality assessment. And my comments were not captured appropriately in the response that the region sent to the minister. And the minister made a decision based on that response. So there are a lot of things here. If your foundation is not solid, then everything else that you conclude based on it isn't good either. And you know, this had to do with air concentrations, but you cannot ignore the fact that when you burn 20,000 more tons, I mean, the laws of physics, the law of mass conservation applies. You burn 20,000 tons more, mass in equals mass out. The mass doesn't get eliminated.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the delegate. In one of your slides, you speak about the failure to address totality of facts around DYEC operational history around dioxin, furan emissions, and monitoring. And your first point was interesting to me, is you state that Clarington and the public made multiple requests to the necessary AMESA data and underlying reports, but region unacceptably continues to deny these reasonable requests. Can you sort of speak to the requests that you are making and what kind of responses you're getting from the region?
Yes, so we have made multiple requests as members of the public. The Clarington has made multiple requests asking for all of the years of AMESA data, and then since they've started providing some quarterly reports, they have invalidated lots and lots of months, and they haven't provided for this entire, from start of operations till now, they've never provided the underlying documents. So it's untraceable and it's not transparent. And in order for the host community and for someone like myself, you know, I am on the Energy from Waste Advisory Committee. When the minister, it was a condition of EA approval that members of Zero Waste from Zero Burning, Durham Environment Watch were on that committee. We can't do our jobs. Our mandate is to, you know, oversee, to help look over what's happening at the DYEC. Without that data, we don't know. We can't do our jobs because it's not good enough that we have dioxin and furan tests that only last 12 hours and that they're only done twice a year. And it's done at optimal conditions. And you can't proclaim safety and say everything's okay based on that little small tiny data set at ideal conditions. That AMESA data is very important, it's extremely important, and it's a red flag that it's being withheld and that the underlying documents are being withheld.
And why would you think they'd be holding that back? Yeah, I'm not
That's an excellent question.
an FOI expert. I don't. I'm just wanting to, and just to my question prior to, have you been getting verbal responses back from the region? Have you been getting written responses? And sort of what has been in that? Because I wouldn't think that bureaucrats would want to hide anything from the public.
You would hope not. However, in the FOI request that I made, the region, I think, they said they didn't have access, that they had no reason to have these records. They, I could give the details to you, and it's very disturbing.
I would like to see that at some point.
And, because in the ECA, they are required to maintain all records at the facility. all EMISA records.
So they would have to have it.
They would have to have it. They would have to have access. You are the majority owner, and you are an owner under the ECA. They're saying Covanta gets those records. And, you know, it's, there's a real issue around this lack of information. And it's such a reasonable request. The public is paying for this monitoring. We pushed for this monitoring. We got it. We're paying for it. And if everything is above board and everything is as people say, then that data should be provided. And it's gone on too long. And that's in the context of all the other things we've brought to your attention, including that these upsets happen more often than you know. There's been numerous shutdowns and startups. There's been exceedances. There's been, you know, stack tests pieced together. And I doubt that all the health reviewers were aware of all of this because it's not in the ESR.
And I would think if public dollars are going into it, then public answers would be a fair request.
Absolutely. And you must remember that we're talking, this is about a pollutant that is highly toxic, and it's especially of concern for children. And the biggest impact to people's health is through the food. And that pathway was not even assessed here, even though you're burning 20,000 tons more. So it's like the most important things have been scoped out and data's unavailable. And it's not a good situation at all. It's very worrisome. I'm here because I am extremely concerned.
And just my last question through you, Mr. Chair, to the delegate. In your presentation, you do speak about DYEC monitoring. You say Durham does not continuously monitor particulate matter. DYEC does not continuously monitor mercury, so on and so forth. What can you sort of explain what we should be doing, and are there best practices where what you've highlighted in red is actually happening in other jurisdictions?
Oh, absolutely. It is happening. And I've just put some examples here, but there's more out there. And especially particulate monitoring. Since 2010, I think it is, the EU has been doing that. They're using opacity, which is considered, it's well understood in the industry, that is a low-grade measure of, particulate emissions. It's crude. Europe's been doing it for a long time, continuously emissions monitoring particulate. And that is best practice. And it's common practice. And it's required in the European Union. So that is a no-brainer. It should be there. Mercury, they only test twice a year. I think it's a 9-hour test in total. The stack test, something like that. It's very similar. Yeah, totaling 18 hours a year, that's right. And it does not, so we should be continuously monitoring mercury, because you're talking about, if your feedstock was, completely homogeneous, it might make sense to do this kind of periodic testing, but it varies. And the other thing that really varies is the incinerator operations. And you're now crowding in more garbage. And that means there is the potential for less turbulence. There's the potential for more plugging of various parts of the incinerator that has already been a problem in the past. And so we need better monitoring. And the region committed at the time of any expansion to do that. And they have not. And the other thing that, with dioxins and furans, we're only looking at one set, the chlorinated ones. That's all that is being stack tested, and that the EMISA samples. But there's polybrominated dioxins and furans that are getting monitored in Europe. That is not happening here, and it should be. And also dioxin like PCB should be part of your EMISA program, and it's not. So.
Why
and
would that be? The PC?
the dioxin-like
why-
PCBs, because they behave like dioxins, and they're hugely toxic and persistent in the environment and affect our food supply. And, you know, it's just not right that, I think our residents deserve the same protections that European residents are getting. And I think concerning together with the operational history we have with the DYEC, it's absolutely necessary that the monitoring get looked at and approved. And they've totally not done that. They've totally didn't answer Clarington. And that's why this works report has to get sent back.
Thank you, Ms. Bracken.
Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? Seeing none, Councillor Neal, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. To the delegate, thank you very much. Now, I heard you mention that the public pays for the monitoring. So that's, okay, that's like you've put that out there. Now, the host community and the public should have access to the AMISA data. That's what you're saying, and you're not getting it and you're sitting on the energy from waste?
That's right. And I think that I wouldn't just say it applies to Clarington. I would say it also applies to all of you. You're counselors. You're responsible for this. And are you really comfortable for dioxins and furans relying on 2 12-hour dioxin and furan stack tests in a year? Also knowing that we have told you they've actually interrupted some of those stack tests? Are you comfortable with the withholding of the AMISA data? How can you do your jobs? How can Clarington protect their community most impacted? And I would say that for Oshawa as well. And how can I, as an advisory committee member, do my job? I can't. I spend most of my time at advisory committee advocating and getting pat responses from the staff that don't get at the heart of the matter. Like, it's just reasonable to provide underlying documents so that things are traceable and transparent. This isn't just an operational tool just for Covanta. The ECA requires you to do it to measure concentration.
And to you, Mr. Chair, the AMISA, is it 12 or 13 of the most dangerous particles that it measures? What are they? I heard Yamada mention mercury. The AMISA, what exactly is it measuring? Just give me, is it 12 or 13 items?
The AMISA is only measuring the chlorinated dioxins and furans. It is not measuring the dioxin-like PCBs. So it is just restricted to dioxins and furans and only the chlorinated ones, the AMISA.
So the flora and fauna testing that's done, I don't know when the last time we did that. Do you know?
Well, that was in the original EA. There was some testing of flora and fauna, but there's been none since. The only thing you have is your soil monitoring, which
Right.
showed that very disturbing result. And I don't think it's acceptable to wait another 3 years to conduct another one. And I do think you do need to do what Europe's doing. You know, Europe has just, you know, as far as guidelines on the amount of dioxins and furan that's allowed in food, they've just continuously brought that level down and down because realizing it's more and more toxic than they thought. And they're testing their agricultural produce. They're testing their flora and fauna, and even around modern incinerators, they're finding unacceptably high levels.
Okay, but what you're saying basically is you're not getting the information and you sit on the committees.
That's right.
And this report that's coming forward and you're delegating on today, you're saying is not complete because of the reports that are missing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I don't see any additional hands. Thank you very much for your delegations. Appreciate it.
Thank
Okay, we are now at 7.1A through D. Just wondering if we could get a motion to refer all those to the report that we're going to see. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Crawford. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Now we're on to 7.1E. This is correspondence from both Linda Gasser and Wendy Bracken in regards to the capacity increase. And this was pulled from the 2024 from Councillor Anderson. I don't see Councillor Anderson here today, but he was one of the people that pulled this, and Councillor Neal. Can I get a motion to maybe receive? Well, again, it's older information that's now been updated with this report, so it's up to you, but I think receive makes more sense, okay? Seconded by Councillor Crawford. Questions or comments? All in favor? Okay, do you want to wait and have the experts answer those questions? Like when they're on the next one, or do you want to, maybe we could, go ahead, ask the question. No, go ahead, ask, I'll give you a mic, just a second, and ask your question, Councillor.
Okay, I guess when this first came, I don't believe, this is the first time this piece of correspondence has been on the floor for discussion, right? Is that true? When I pulled this correspondence, it had not been on the floor for discussion before.
No, I believe it was part of the council information package
Okay,
from back in May.
so this is being referred to the report.
No, this is being received for information.
We cannot refer this to the report?
So we could, the motion is to receive it. The recommendation from staff is to receive it. It is different than the other correspondence because it predates the actual report and with the experts that are on the call. But why don't you ask your specific questions? We have experts. in
Well,
there.
I guess my one question is, could this be part of the report? I guess, like, I can't make a motion here because I'm not on the committee, but that's what I'm asking. Can this,
No, but you can ask your question now on this, which
right.
will be, we have experts in the room. Ask your technical question. Go ahead, sir.
okay, because by the sounds of it, this correspondence refers to Durham York Energy as kind of a hit and miss. When people question certain things, and I think that's what this relates to, is that the throughput capacity increase to 160,000 tons per year is not really being explained properly to the public or to Clarington Council. So that's what this correspondence is in relation to. So it has a direct link to this report that's coming out today. And I asked if it's ever been on the floor before, and evidently not. So, I mean, can staff tell me why this correspondence would not be part of the report? Or are they going to answer the questions that are in the correspondence or the letter that I pulled here today?
So
It's plain and simple.
So again, what I would have loved to see is, again, there's lots of correspondence, lots of questions in that information. We have experts in the room today that can answer your technical questions. Do you want to be really clear on what your question is? Your question is, why wasn't this before council? It was on a CIP report that could be pulled, again, back in May when this was on.
No, I mean, it's been answered. The correspondence is it's the first time it's been on the floor, even though I pulled it from the May 24th, 2024 council information package. As a councilor, I'm able to do that. And if the experts are in the room, can they answer in regard to the correspondence that I've pulled? Why is this throughput capacity increased to 160,000 tons per year being pushed through when this correspondence from Linda Gasser and Wendy Bracken has not been vetted at all? The questions have not been answered in the correspondence. Like, just to receive it for information, I don't understand.
Okay, so let me just, question to staff. I think I'm going to try and ask a question to staff that might answer this. How many times have we reported on the increase from 140 to 60 over the last number of years? How many pages of reports have we seen, Andrew? Go ahead.
I mean, I don't have a specific number, but certainly we went through the screening process on this. We received elevation requests. We responded to concerns received during the elevation requests. And ultimately, the decision by the ministry was to allow the process to move forward.
And I think even, Ms. Bracken and
Excuse
Ms.
me, Mr.
Gass-
Chair, I didn't exactly hear the end of Andrew's last, I didn't catch it. I don't know if the delegations caught his answer either.
Sorry, just that the MECP has allowed the screening process. They denied the elevation request and allowed us to continue moving forward with the process.
And we've just from these two individuals, we've had half a dozen or a dozen delegations on all of these same topics in the last 12 months, I think, right?
Again, don't have an exact number, but there has been multiple delegations, yes.
Yeah, and multiple reports on this agenda and on committee of a whole and on council, correct?
I'm not sure what's gone directly to committee and whole and council within the last 12 months. I think it's mostly been at this committee at this point.
Okay, but every one of these committee meetings goes to committee of a whole.
Correct.
Okay.
Or directly.
Yeah, to committee of the whole first, and then, anyway. But certainly, we've talked about this at length. Okay, go ahead.
And is all the information posted on the DYEC website?
We don't post correspondence received on the DYEC website. We do post, produce a complaint and inquiry log that is updated where, especially where people have called into the facility, but typically things that go through the council and committee structure fall within the council and committee structure.
But it's published on Durham.ca, correct?
Correct.
So how does, through you, Mr. Chair, how does the public and the Clarington Council know that their questions are being answered? Like I don't understand the process.
So there's a 57-page report, I think, 57 or more on the agenda today, answering
Yeah.
just their questions. So again, if you're looking at how do we communicate to the Clarington Council and answer the questions, again, we have experts on the call today. We have a 57-page report here today. And there's been probably 1,000 pages of documentation over the last 12 months that we've talked about in this room.
Okay, well, that's my questions right now. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nicholson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I don't see you though. Do you want to turn on your camera?
If I turn my camera on, my computer connection drops.
Okay.
It's a glitch within my computer. Otherwise, I'd be happy to show you my smiling face. My question, first of all, I'd like to request a recorded vote on this motion. The reason for the request for the recorded vote is that I'm not convinced that this response is sufficient to answer the questions from Clarington. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Again, we have experts in the room. If you have a technical question on that piece of correspondence, now would be your opportunity.
With due respect, Mr. Chairman, I don't take verbal responses. Verbal responses don't mean anything to me because there's no record.
Except for the video,
I've read
I
the-
understand. Thanks.
But there's no record that the public can access beyond this meeting scope. So I much prefer a written response, even from our technical people, so that can be reviewed and peer reviewed.
Okay,
To simply provide a verbal response. Do I have the floor?
yeah, you have the floor. I was going to ask a question to staff just to clarify one of your points. The video that's posted, do we also have?
Why do you need to clarify my points, Mr. Chairman?
Well, because I think something that you said wasn't factual. I just want to confirm with clerks, if you don't mind. So just a question to staff. Every video that's posted also has a transcript of what was stated, correct? It's written out? It's posted. I think we also have, a text piece comes as well. But anyway, okay, go ahead, sir. Thanks, Councillor.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern is that, especially on technical reports, video responses, verbal responses, they can be helpful, but sometimes they can be incomplete. When you get a written response to a direct question, then, again, as I stated, that allows the person that's reviewing it to review it one or two times just to make sure they understand what the response is. It allows for the ability to offer the response to a peer review if it's necessary. Clarington has made a reasonable request, I believe, of our staff, and I think it begs a written response. And the report subsequent that you keep mentioning, the 57 report, does not answer these questions. So in the absence of a direct answer, I will be voting against the receipt for information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Yamada, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do echo some of the comments made by Councillor Nicholson. I think it doesn't matter if there's 1,000 pages over a few years, 2,000, 5,000. If the questions aren't answered within the information provided, then they're not answered. And I think members of Clarington Council and the delegates wouldn't be here today if there was information provided. And I'll give you just one example. They talk about in report 2024-WR-7, one of the responses from staff is that cost is relevant but not the primary factor for the decision. Staff time is the most significant cost associated with the capacity increases. Additional costs include consultant support for ECA amendments, and it goes on, but there's no real quantifiable numbers. The staff response is vague and provides no quantifiable costs attributed to the capacity increase for the EA screening process to date and the costs anticipated to complete the ECA and other approval processes. I think there should be more information provided to Clarington. I know if I was a Clarington taxpayer and if I were a Clarington councillor and I was hosting this piece of waste infrastructure near my home where I live, where I'm raising my children, I would want more detailed information. I would want the answers that Ms. Bracken has highlighted in red in her delegation. I would think that would be information that we would want to provide, because if you provide that information to the public, it breeds confidence in the process. And you know, if we've got residents here who are questioning the information being presented, there may be a lack of confidence, and I wouldn't want to see that being a regional councillor. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Next, we've got Mayor Foster. Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, thanks, Chair Barton. If I was a Clarington councillor, if I was a Clarington resident, I would think I am the Clarington mayor. I am a Clarington resident. I think I don't see the list. There was a suggestion that Clarington councillors were here. I don't know if Councillor Wu is on, Councillor Anderson is not. For all of the well-meaning colleagues of mine at Durham Region right now, gosh golly gee, you could ask Clarington. I know it's a radical idea. Truthfully, on some of these issues, we've been around the block so many times and have had the same questions, and I suspect we'll go around the block again. But let's see, instead of speculating, instead of putting words in our mouth, how be you simply ask us? Mr. Chair, I'm not going to be able to stay particularly long. I will take the opportunity, some of the statements that were made earlier, a quote that the consultants, these are licensed, registered professionals, create artificial limits that, based on the reports, myths persist. The most important things have been scoped out. Those are some pretty serious allegations. If I was one of the consultants whose names, the names of their companies, their signatures appear on these documents, I might be very concerned as to the damage to my reputation. And then we hear from members of council, question, why are staff holding information back? Why do bureaucrats want to hide anything from the public? those are exceptionally serious allegations. Now, if we believe in transparency, if we believe in integrity, I don't know if we need to look at these, but if I'm a member of staff and the power imbalance between staff and council, as councillors, we can say pretty much anything we want to say. Staff do not have that same ability. But I think staff, as well as the consultants, when their integrity is freely challenged without their ability to defend their integrity, I have very, very real concerns with that. So Clarington, there may or may not be. I don't know what Clarington Council is going to, say or do with this. My knee jerk, quite frankly, on most of this is, this is a provincial responsibility. Staff have been speaking with staff at the province that have expertise, have access to the expertise. They've been speaking to me as well. Let the province on most of this get back to us on it. But we've been around the block so many times, and so very frequently have had the same answers and then proceed to go around the block on some of this many times again. But if you haven't noted, a little bit ticked that words would be put in the mouth of Clarington councillors and the residents of Clarington. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Mayor Foster. I appreciate it. Councillor Neal, again, this is on the receive for information on this piece of correspondence. Oh, just a second. Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would prefer that this be part of the report because I think this correspondence is important. But I mean, I do have concerns about the airshed in South Oshawa, but I'm also concerned about the airshed across the whole region. We just had a presentation about the apple industry at planning yesterday, so I'm very concerned about the apples that are growing in Newcastle with incinerator there. So I mean, like if I sound over the top in regards to my concerns, then why don't we just get everything put on the table? This correspondence should be sent to the report. Someone should make that motion. Receive for information is not good enough. Then if that's the case, and what the words I just heard, let's get everything out there and all the reports that we need to and everything posted on the websites. Thank you.
Again, and just for clarification, this is on the website. We're talking about it in open council, on video, and we have experts who are waiting to talk about a report that we've paid to produce, and we're talking about receive. Councillor Yamada, again, go ahead.
I will refer the correspondence to the report.
Okay, so we already have a motion on the floor. Shall we vote on that? Because we have a motion on the floor to receive at the moment? Of course.
To receive, not to have it referred to the, is it a motion to refer the correspondence to the staff report?
Clerks, go ahead.
I thought it was
Currently,
just
the
a
motion on
to
the
receive.
floor is to receive for information, and there has been a recorded vote called by Councillor Nicholson.
Okay.
Okay, so Councillor Marin Pietri, you have the floor. Go ahead.
So initially I asked if we could refer this to the report. I don't have any problems referring to the report, but one of the main underlying questions that I think we're all asking ourselves, whether we're delegates or whether we're council members or staff, is whether or not the information that's being requested has been made available. So I'd just like to ask through you if that's the case.
Okay.
If that's the case, then the receipt is something that can move forward with out of logic. If it's not the case, then an answer as to why the information is not forthcoming needs to be provided. But my understanding through the conversations that we've had today and throughout the past decade is that there is information that needs to be forthcoming. It's regulated by way of legislations and environmental standards. And there are professional designations that are associated and attached to each of the information pieces that must come forward. So my question is, through you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. you want to take that, Ramesh, or do you want to go give it to Andrew? Your call.
I can start probably.
Okay.
Yeah, through the chair. The report WR7 points out to every question and responds to every one of those questions. Now, the responses may not be satisfactory to all, but they have been answered. Whether it's about the AMISA data, whether it's about, the reason we are doing this, and such as, comments such as, we are very successful in our diversion programs. We are not denying it. And therefore, we don't need it. That's the part we deny. Because we are planning for growth, we are planning for operational efficiency and so on. So my short answer is, we have answered the questions. Like I said, it may not be satisfactory to everyone who reads the report.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I apologize, I shut the microphone off.
No problem.
So if we're in an open forum, which we are, and we're asking questions that result in tangible actions for not just the delegates, but for the project's advancement, I guess the underlying question is, if we set aside the receipt for information and we refer this to the report, what is the underlying outcome that council members wish to not just impose, but effectively activate? What is the intent? What is the intent? So, because I see that the receipt for information recommended by staff is that that it be based on the request of an update report for the Durham York Energy Center throughput capacity increase to 160 tons per year. Is that what we're voting on right now?
So let me jump in for a sec. I don't think it makes any difference. Everything that ever gets sent goes to staff. Everybody sees every report. What I'm really trying to do here is make sure that we get the information that we paid for, that the Clarington Council have asked for, on the floor so we could talk about it. I really don't know why we're debating receive or refer. It really doesn't matter to me or to staff. That was the recommendation. I thought we would follow along. That's why we linked one thing and not the other. But the fact that we're still wasting time on this is a problem.
Yeah.
And I'm not blaming you at all.
No.
Just the process is
I'll-
frustrating.
No, as the mover, and I think the seconder may have the same questions, I'm not certain, but as the mover, I want just some clarity because we have an open forum. We can continue to debate this. If there is an understanding of what we're trying to achieve in the referral to the report, aside from optics, if there's a tangible, this is, if my colleagues can tell me, this is what I would like to affect in order to activate X, and this is Y, I'm happy, because that was my initial response, to remove the receipt and go for the referral. But I haven't heard that. I've just heard that I don't like it, we haven't done enough, and we need to be more forthcoming about what is X and Y. I get the Y part. I want to get there, but what is it that we're trying to affect?
And my understanding.
No, I'm talking to my colleagues.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't want to be criticized for moving a motion that essentially, doesn't do what my colleagues wish on behalf of those who they're advocating for.
Okay.
I want to be helpful. So please, I ask you, through you, to my colleagues, to help me understand what it is that they wish to do.
So you're asking.
Not just refer it, but what is the referral going to entail?
Okay.
Like, what is the end result that we're looking for in the referral? Aside from, having done something that we're asked to do. What is the ultimate effect that referral is going to have? And excuse me for sounding aggravated, but it's confusing and a bit frustrating. So I couldn't imagine staff or the community, being in a situation where they can understand this, because I'm having a hard time understanding what the referral will activate. So I'm openly speaking to my colleagues through you.
Okay. Do you want to comment on the difference between refer and receive? I know, but I just, okay. 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 Oh, you mean the people who have been fighting to make sure it's referred? Okay. Oh, we lost your mic again.
So what is it that it's going to cause? What is the referral going to cause?
again, and my understanding is nothing, and I know, but we have Councillor Nicholson who was concerned about this. Councillor? Councillor Nicholson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. First of all, I appreciate the comments that Councillor Marion Pietri put forward, because he is asking the legitimate question here. But our concern, I guess, that to explain even more detail why some of us, and I'll speak for myself, are opposing receive information, is it's my view that a receive information means that we find that the responses from our staff regarding that correspondence is sufficient. And even our staff have indicated, yes, they have responded, but some of the answers may not be sufficient to prudently answer all the questions or the depth of questions that have been put. It's a matter of judgment. If you believe that the staff responses are adequate, then obviously you would support the receive for information. If you believe that the staff responses are not adequate, then you would oppose it. I think that puts it in a nutshell. It's an indication of our confidence level as councillors in the response that we receive to the correspondence. As for the question of whether you refer it to the next report, again, I don't believe a referral would achieve a lot one way or the other. We can deal with the 57-page report separately, but I think there's a number of us want to give a clear indication as councillors that we are not happy with the response. And that's why we're opposing the receive information, so we express that unhappiness. When the report next comes up for debate, we'll be very clear in our comments and questions at that time. So I think hopefully that explains why a number of us are opposing the receive for information. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that's a really clear line. Perfect. We do have a motion on the floor. Councillor Marion Pietri, if you're okay keeping your original motion, this is, let's take Councillor Nicholson's view to heart and say if we're comfortable and we trust staff, vote for receive. If we're opposed, then we go the other way. That's fair to me. Everyone good with that? And we have a recorded vote called. All in favor? Recorded vote? Just a second. Okay, so that's carried 6-2. Perfect. Okay, so we're now on to the meat of the agenda. Councillor Nicholson, we're not actually on an item now. We're at 7.2A. So let's wait until we get this on the floor, if that works. So 7.2A, this is report 2024 WR7, and it's the response report for the questions that were raised at the municipality of Clarington. Do you want to speak to this before we get started, and then you can introduce your experts and have them go through it? Ramesh? Okay, so let's put it on the floor. So moved by Chair Henry, seconded by Councillor Marion Pietri to get it on the floor. Okay, and I think he really wants to speak, but let's, sure. Councillor Nicholson, we wanted to have staff introduce the report and talk about it, if that works.
No, Mr. Chairman, I've been trying to raise a point of order for the last 3 minutes. You keep cutting me off.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear
you. You made a statement which needs to be retracted. You said those of us who do not support the receive for information do not trust staff. And I think that is an inappropriate comment for a chair or any member of council to make about their fellow councillors. Whether we disagree with the report or not, whether we want to receive information or not, in no way indicates that we do not trust staff. And Mr. Chair, I respectfully request you withdraw that statement.
And what I'll do, if that works, Councillor Nicholson, I'm going to listen to the video when we're done, because as everything is recorded, I'll listen to how that came across. And if I choose to retract it after I've listened to it and seen the full context, I'll do that. Okay, thank you. All right, so we do have an item on the floor. Ramesh, do you want to introduce it? Sure. Okay, perfect.
Okay, this report is basically an attempt to respond to the questions we had through multiple forums, like, through, certainly through the delegations, through Clarington Council, and the various advisory committees, and as well as some of the questions that were posed to MECP in our quest to go from 140 to 160. Just by way of history, I think it was 3-4 years ago, Regional Council approved staff to look into expansion from 140 to 160, and the need for the additional 20,000 tons of processing per year really became more critical during the pandemic, where, as you know, like, we did have a temporary exemption to go to 160. So the last 3-4 years, like, we've gone through the studies, and we came with a report like just before the summer break, like, just to outline the fact that we're going to go ahead with the ECA application. And we were asked to come back with answers to a whole set of questions, and that's what it's done. Among other things, we were also asked to get an opinion from our medical officer of health, who in turn did engage some external experts who are also available today, virtually connected, to answer any questions pertaining to the attachments to the report, which was all commissioned through Dr. Kyle, and rest of the responses in the report, obviously staff are here to answer. Thank you.
Okay. Andrew, do you want to bring up anything here? Again, there's lots of information. We have lots of data and lots of people with actual expertise on the call today. So, anything else you want to bring up? Okay, Councillor Marinpoche, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. And I appreciate the delegations asking the tough questions, and I do appreciate staff doing the work that they've done for a long time on the file. But there are two underlying questions that I gathered from the presentation, and there may be more, but these are the two principal questions. And I don't see our legal counsel here, but I'm sure that we have this answer, or at least I hope we do. The question surrounding the contractual obligation that we have with the municipality in reference to the original, capacity versus the expanded capacity. And I believe it relates to the host agreement and all of that. Just wondering if staff can comment on what legal sort of position we have in that respect, because that was brought up as to whether or not our moving forward outside of the realm of the original capacity requirements, or at least provisions approved, actually provide us with a legal standing to do so, or whether or not this has to be spoken to by another host agreement.
Through the chair, if I'll start, and I'll probably refer to Mr. Wakeford, who's here today.
Sure.
The 140 to 160,000 tons, my understanding is when the references were made to, expanding monitoring systems and so on for any expansion, was for physical plant expansion. And I'm going to ask to see if Mr. Wakeford might be able to validate it, or Andrew.
Sure.
And this is, again, we are not doing any expansion to the plant. It's only going to operate more days in the year, the same way it operates rest of the year. Rather than going to landfill sites through a bypass mechanism, it is now going to have the additional operational flexibility to do another 20,000 tons. If I can just ask if Mr. Wakeford would have anything to add to it?
I will decline to provide my legal opinion with respect to the contract in open session. I'm happy to do so in closed session if the committee wishes to go there. But I will agree with the commissioner's comments regarding the characterization of what's occurred here. This is best thought of, to my understanding, as an optimization, not necessarily a strict increase in 20,000 tons that will be processed, but rather it provides operational flexibility to the plant to optimize what's there already.
Appreciate that. Just wanted to ask, based on that, the plant, does it physically expand, or is it the operations and the function of the current plant expanding?
Yeah, there is no plant expansion.
No capital expansion.
No.
As part of the questioning, I think the second question, it's one that we need some clarity on, and that's the delivery, the functional sort of service, in that the monitoring is being questioned. If we can have staff speak to that, because I understand the legal question needs to be dealt with in camera if required. I get the gist of it. It sounds to me that from the answer that was provided, that there isn't a contractual obligation for us to go to the host agreement and essentially open things back up for that particular reason, unless I misunderstood that. The question that I ask about the servicing, the functional aspect, is it's being suggested that our monitoring isn't, I guess, up to standard or appropriate or consistent enough. So if I could have staff respond to that, because those are the two questions that I gathered being the most, I guess, important from the presentations.
If I can just speak to the monitoring system before I turn it over to Mr. Evans. I think the fundamental space of disagreement here is this an increase, or is this going back to 10, 15 years ago, like reopening the EA? My view is, and based on my reading, and Andrew can validate, you're talking about no change to operation, status quo, probably another 20 more days per year when it's being bypassed, it's not going to be. So all the monitoring systems that we have in place, which were state of the art when implemented, and at least anecdotally remains the state of the art today, are what is going to process the additional 20,000 tons, like it does on the 140,000. The question then is, when do you review the monitoring system to see what has changed the last 10 years and so on? Andrew and their team are part of many organizations. They're constantly keeping their eyes open for any monitoring system capabilities we want to add without expanding the plant itself within the existing footprint. If there's anything that comes to our recommendation, it comes to council. Again, the question is the time to review the entire plant and the monitoring systems and the operations to go from 140 to 160? Or was this similar to the original EA that we did for 140, and maybe any future expansion, if it's even going to happen, if that's the right time? Okay. Mr. Andrew might have something to add, especially on the monitoring systems.
Yeah, and I may speak to a few of the,
Sure.
the questioned items. So there was one on in terms of the European standards versus Canadian and North American standards. Certainly, the Canadian reference methods do typically follow more of an US EPA type approach. However, the laboratories that this data is going to are, Canadian accredited laboratories, and many of them follow ISO standards, and there's continued effort. Especially, just in general terms, as industry has moved global now, you want to see the same results, whether you're using a lab in North America or Europe. So I don't have any, concerns with our labs are doing things significantly different than in Europe at this point. With respect to things like the particulate matter, certainly, we report on the opacity versus the particulate matter. Opacity, again, tends to be more of a North American type monitor. The particulate matter tends to be more the European approach. However, when you're looking at how that particulate matter measurement is taken, it's actually taken in many cases using opacity. And then it's applied against a calibration curve, which relies on, again, the calibration curve to be validated over certain conditions, and that the plant operates in those conditions when you're putting that out there. Really, the opacity sort of looks at, it's in terms of, how much light passes through the emission without being blocked. So if you started to see particulate come out in the plant, you would see the opacity increase. And we've got a fairly low, tight restriction on that, and we're generally well below that as well. The plant also does internally have dust monitors. If something like a baghouse was to rupture, they see something more quickly, but that's more on the operational data side rather than the reported side. To things like mercury, certainly there are some options for SEMS and for long-term sampling for mercury now. The BAT document from the EU does acknowledge that where plants have seen stable mercury levels, there's not necessarily a need to do that. I just was looking quickly at our most recent source test results. as well as the ambient air results. We do monitor mercury in the ambient air area as well. And the source test results were actually even below the ambient standard. So our in-stack limit is, I think the limit is 15 micrograms per standard cubic meter. The Ontario limit is 2, and I believe we were generally below 1 on those results. So just in terms of whether there's a sufficient amount of material to really be chasing that number, certainly I don't think that's necessarily the case, and I think that was considered in the original project. Moving forward, if we started to see higher mercury levels show up in the environment, we would definitely look at that technology as being more appropriate, but it's not something we've seen given that the ambient air results are low for mercury. I think it's something that's not really common, definitely as commonly seen in households as it was at one point.
I appreciate that. I do have a question of my own after asking those two questions, because I think, and I appreciate the detailed and comprehensive response provided by staff. Truth be told, I never voted for the facility, and I would have wished that it would have been built in York Region. This would have been a lot easier, the conversation. We wouldn't be having these discussions. In fact, I feel for those who are, concerned with this, as I am as well. So my last question, the third question is, if you have something that you're concerned with by way of this testing, and you actually identify something that's really of danger, what would be the mechanism and what would happen if that occurred? Because that is something that concerns us all.
So I think I can go right back to the initial DNF exceedance in 2016. We shut the plant down and we put in a monitoring plan and a plan to improve those results. And the plant, I don't believe, it was before my time at the region, but the plant wasn't opened back up until we were comfortable moving forward with that. Smaller things, even when I'm looking at the data online, if I see something that's a bit out of character, I will talk to either the staff who are based at the plant, or I will call the facility manager or our owner's engineer to ask those questions and to request additional information. And I know our staff are looking at that data in many cases more frequently than I am to look at that. And we are always trying to drive continuous improvement at the plant in any form. There's continual discussion on whether it's looking at balancing reagent usage or really an opportunity to improve the plant operations.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciate the opportunity to ask the questions and staff's response. I may have more to say or ask about as we move forward, but I want to thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and we've had a lot of questions to non-experts in the room numerous times during this meeting and other times. Oh, perfect. I just want to make sure that those that have been very vocal to staff and lots of concerns about what we're sharing, we do have experts in the room. We want to have technical questions today to those people. And while I was about to say that, Councillor Yamada did put up his hand. So, Councillor, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, I do have a couple questions. And again, I'm going to start with the cost section under 3.4A. I guess what I'm looking for when we talk about costs being relevant but not a primary factor, I'm looking to why there's sort of no numbers within the answers outside of the 140,000 ton number that was provided. Is staff able to quantify costs attributed to the capacity increase, the screening process, those kind of issues, and sort of talk more about overall cost within the answer that was asked?
So,
or the question that was asked?
I can speak in some general terms, about the cost of the process to go through. To get into the detailed sort of per ton cost breakdown and how that works in terms of bypasses versus contract and some of the contractual details, I'd probably look to Mr. Wakeford to comment, but I think we may need to go into closed session given that they are specific commercially confidential information. I'm sort of seeing a nod from legal, so I will do the general. So we did a lot of the screening report based on the original EA studies, and it was completed by staff in-house, as well as supported by Covanta, now Reworld, in terms of the modeling, given that they needed to update some of the modeling for the facility at that time on kind of an ongoing basis. In terms of the costs, it was largely in terms of the promotion in open houses and communication aspects. We are looking at, I think, I'll say in the low tens of thousands of dollars to deal with the medical officer's health report and their consultants. And as part of the ECA process, there is an application fee, I will say in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, as well as we will be at some point needing to retain a consultant to do the ECA level modeling, again in that tens of thousands of dollars range. In general terms, as to how that impacts in terms of our the expansion impacts our waste budget. So currently, under the contract, we receive above $140,000. We receive a significantly discounted rate from the operator, and so that is advantageous to us, as opposed to sending that material to bypass, which we have to pay for. In addition to that preferential rate, where power is eligible under the power purchase agreement, which is sort of caps us at 13.9 megawatts. So below that 13.9, we get a preferred rate. Above that, we get market rate. So that's where there's that sort of difference in cost. It will depend on whether that power falls, when it's produced, as to if that is under the market rate or not. Typically, when we're looking at sort of extending operations rather than shutting down at the end of the year, that would be expected to be under the power purchase agreement rate. And that would actually put us to the point where we are sort of net positive in terms of processing costs. So we would be getting a net revenue to the region as opposed to our incurring bypass costs.
Okay. My second question through you, Mr. Chair, when we talk about the need for increased capacity in terms of growth, is there an opportunity to share the data underpinning the 2019 assumptions that waste disposal capacity is needed? Because if we're hearing that increase or capacity increases sort of remain stable, that we're advancing programs to divert waste, I'm just trying to understand sort of the data that's saying the added 20,000 is needed, because I've been sitting around council now for over 10 years and the word growth is always thrown out. I'd prefer to see more data.
So certainly, so in our waste reports, it does speak to sort of bypass tonnages. So that's material that is typically generated beyond the plant's limitation right now. It does vary year to year. Certainly saw a peak with COVID, and that number has been declining a little bit as we continue to advocate for our diversion programs and enhance those. However, at the end of the day, regional growth plans are to significantly increase the population within the next several decades. And we're of the opinion that we can't continue to drop the per capita generation rate at a level that will eliminate that need. We'll certainly continue to do our best to minimize that need. And this is where sort of the benefit of just using the existing capital of the facility comes in. We're not looking to invest additional capital dollars to move to a third processing line, which would give us in that 250,000 ton. We're trying to delay that as much as possible. We just realized that the existing plant has some ability to process some more material, and we're looking to take advantage of that.
So after moving on July 1st of this year with the enhanced green bin program,
Yep.
will we start seeing diversion numbers that will show that, if we're putting more in the green bin, for example, that we're seeing greater diversion rates too? Because I'm my 5-year-old, we're still not comfortable, her sleeping in her underwear on when she goes to bed and wake up dry. So we're still using diapers, and I'm happy to put those good nights in my green bin. But and I can see just anecdotally that my garbage bags are a little less. So I'm kind of wanting to know what kind of numbers or what kind of data will be presented to council to sort of show that we're moving in the right direction, because I'm not against the 20,000 expansion. I just want to see more data and make sure the questions are being answered prior to moving forward on a decision like this.
Certainly. So Joy, sorry, just let me pull up a few statistics. It is early days in the Greenman program. And also we also rolled over our extended producer responsibility requirements
Yes.
at the same time. So we are continuing, and you may have noticed the Curbex signs, promoting the extra green bin, and we're continuing with that public messaging. So year over year for collected tons since the enhanced green bin's been in place, so just a few months now, we've seen a roughly 11.5% increase in the amount of material we're picking up through the green bin. We've moved about 10% of our subsidized additional green bins. That number is picked up 20%. That number is picked up a bit more recently with our continued advertising, as well as we're continuing to roll out the social media program. I think our real goal over both the enhanced expanded green bin program and the multi-res organics, which is also on the agenda today, was to try and move, approximately or upwards of 10,000 tons of material from the black bag program into our green bin program. So certainly that is, again, pushes that number down. But we are looking long-term on this in terms of growth that, we don't expect to be able to stay within, we see a need to move that material forward as the region continues to grow.
And supplemental, can we sort of speak to then more of the overall multi-residential households and, the issue of separating organics and how we move forward and sort of what the expected annual tonnage would look like or what kind of assumptions or predictions we're looking at sort of 5 years, 10 years out?
Part of that is going to depend on how growth looks to the region. The multi-res sector is growing, so as more people and more buildings are built there, we do expect the developers to be putting in that required dedicated infrastructure to make it easier for residents. The program we're looking at right now for the 6 that are participating is to largely rely on cart system. They don't necessarily have the additional chutes in place, so I think primarily we're relying on residents to come down and put that material in the green bin. I think overall with that multi-res program, I just may need to look behind me, I think we were looking at 4,000 tons when it was being looked at across the region. Roughly 60% of our multi-res in the region is located within Whitby and Oshawa, who are going ahead with that program sort of on their own when they're ready to do that. So that will decrease the overall 4,000 that we're able to get from the rest of the 6. But that's sort of the ballpark numbers that we're looking at as far as that program goes.
Thank you. And I just want to make one point of clarification. I never said staff was hiding anything. I said I didn't want answers to be perceived that the public might be thinking, because I think we're trying to do the best we can. I know staff does yeoman's duty, and I do just want to ensure that public confidence is there, so when we move forward on decisions like these, that the whole community is behind these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for all the answers. We appreciate it. Wondering if you could talk a little bit about the AMISA data and what the purpose of that system is for, and then what we have tried to do with it, and then again, how it's being perceived from some members of the public, and sort of what the tool was intended for. And again, I'd encourage you to use your experts that are on the call.
Certainly. So I don't know if Dr. Kyle, if your experts want to talk about what their kind of look at the intent of the AMISA system was at this point.
So, Chair, we did ask for expert opinion regarding AMEMSA, but there wasn't a detailed line of inquiry. It was, the content was in the context of inclusion of MEMS as part of an environmental monitoring program. So I don't want to put our experts on the spot because it really was not a detailed line of inquiry. What I mean by that is an environmental scan looking at North America and so forth. It was more in the realm of expert opinion. And the opinion we received was that MEMSA is properly used for plant optimization purposes and generally is not used as part of an environmental monitoring program. And I think that that is spelled out in our report. Having said that, we do have our experts here. If they want to confirm what I've said, bearing in mind, don't want to catch them flat-footed because it wasn't a detailed line of inquiry that was requested by me.
So let me try this as chair, just for the experts in the room. Do any of you want to comment on that question on the purpose of the AMISA and your opinion on whether or not we're using it correctly as a tool for plant optimization versus another purpose? Any of you want to put your hand up and speak to that or no? Okay, I don't see any hands. Why don't you jump in, Andrew? Go ahead.
Sure. So maybe I'll just speak to sort of our opinion of the intent of the program. So when we were looking at the facilities operation, we recognized that the required once per year source test wasn't sufficient enough to really give confidence in plant performance. And really, we didn't want to have to wait till that source test came back to see if there was a potential issue. And that was brought up, raised as a concern by members of the public, and that was something we voluntarily agreed to put in. Since then, we do the source test twice per year now. But in the interim, roughly on a monthly basis, a sample is generated looking at sort of the overall level of dioxins and furans within the plant. That system isn't a compliance point for the facility. There's no limit. We sort of look at it as a trending tool, long-term trending tool, and verifying that the APC system is working as intended. There are some limitations to that program in terms of how well it agrees with the source tests, which are considered the compliance point and sort of the standard. And there are also issues with, for both the source testing and for the AMISA system, you need to have a steady flow of air through the plant, and versus the system, because the particulates that you're trying to measure don't necessarily behave like the gas that they're kind of contained in. So that's something that we refer to as isokinetic conditions. Fairly easy to maintain that with, I think there's about 8 or 9 people doing the source test that are looking at kind of constantly adjusting flows of the source testing program. With the AMISA system, if something changes quickly in the plant, the system isn't capable of responding. What that leads to is the potential to, over or under sample what's in the stack and what's coming out of the stack versus the sample. And so that's where, in terms of our work plan moving forward that we responded to the ministry with, and that led to these quarterly reports coming on the CIP, was that we would continue to look at that data. If there is an issue, we do sit down with Covanta/Reworld and go over how that could have occurred, and if there's steps to take to prevent a reoccurrence. But at times, if we look at it and that sample isn't considered, wasn't sampled under conditions that generate a number consistent with what was coming out of the plant, that's where we look to invalidate it. We consider that operational data, and operational data is held by the contractor, by the operator, when we don't publish that information. There's roughly 1,200 sensors within that plant. We really only publish the data that we're required to in terms of our compliance points, and there's a few other non-compliance, such as I think we do total hydrocarbons, for example, as an indication of sort of comparable to some of the VOCs, and a few things like ammonia slip, just as general information. The problem is when you get into some of these operational data, especially at where their sampling interval is much greater than the compliance interval, you can start to look at points, and it becomes hard for a member of the public to really understand that data, and there ends up being miscommunication as to what a number could mean.
Thanks for that. Another question, just from I'll start with climate change. From a total carbon perspective, landfill versus the EFW. Do you want to just talk about that? And I know that the waste stream is changing over time, but do you want to just talk about the alternatives and what that does from a climate perspective?
Sure, I'll give it my best chance. We could be here a long time. But, essentially, when material goes to landfill, it's releasing methane, which is much more potent than CO2, into the atmosphere. It is also releasing CO2, but it's biogenic, so it's not counted. Given the global warming potential, in many cases, landfills do have collection systems, either flare, cogeneration, or some of them now are moving to the renewable natural gas aspect. However, those landfill gas capture systems, I've heard sort of at a perfectly operating system, you're looking at like a 70% capture efficiency. So there are still, there is still a significant amount of methane coming out of landfills. I think in Canada it's the number 3 source, so comprising about 15%. And globally, I think it's higher, just because Canada has so much of that landfill gas capture infrastructure in place. So that's where sort of that's the alternative. When you look at EFW and how the life cycle analysis came into, how it was done, is we looked at, so what are the emissions for the region to basically long haul truck that to one of our existing contract landfills, and sort of the emissions associated with that versus the emissions at the facility, as well as what emissions the power produced from that facility would offset from the grid. Again, Canada is fortunate, and Ontario especially is fortunate to have a very clean grid, given our amount of nuclear and hydroelectric. Certainly not, a coal or natural fire-based grid that is or was the case in other areas. And so that's when we looked at it, and when we looked at those opportunities, we found that EFW was the better option. In terms of our own climate reporting, we do report on our 7 closed landfills. And they are still a significant source, even though most of them have been closed for, I think, close to 30 years now. There are a few that were open more recently. However, we don't actually report on any emissions from the material that's bypassed to a third-party site, although in many cases those sites do have their own reporting obligations, and that's all within the Ontario reported database.
Okay. Thank you for that. We've talked at length about soil testing before. We know we had a level that was higher than we expected on that. Just my question would be, and around that, we had record forest fires in the area. We could, high smoke content. This area is right just south of the 401. There's other sources in the area. When you look at the exceedance, maybe not exceedance, let me correct that, thank you very much. When you look at the data that we received there, how do you confirm where that may have come from with all of the other sources all around? And sort of how do you figure that into the data?
We can't really, the sources in the ambient are it is ambient, it is capturing from multiple sources. We do look at how that site was against the provincial limit, and we are still well below that. We will continue to look at trends. The other thing that we did look at, in particular for this sample, is that the upwind sample also came back high. However, there was a duplicate measurement for standard laboratory analysis taken from that, and that second sample came back much lower. So there's sort of a question there. And if you look far enough back to even before the facility was in operation, there was actually another high sample that did come out of that upstream location. So there may just be some variability in the heterogeneity of the soil. But it is something we'll be continuing to watch to see if there's trends, if there's other causes for concern, and certainly we could look at in the future at some point, if necessary, looking at some of those some additional work on the isomer type data and the congener type data that Intrinsic sort of alluded to there. Typically, that's something we haven't gone into detail. We're just sort of monitoring from an ambient perspective, and continue to look at our source emissions. I would note that because it has come up in terms of the modeling, all of our modeling for both the original EA and our screening report did actually assume that the facility was putting out at the limit at all times it was operating. In some cases in the original EA, it was actually assuming to be over the limit 20% of the time. And so we are very conservative. There are other industry, when they look for expansion, they're looking at only their most recent source tests to put that forward in terms of what their emissions are. So we do have that level of conservatism, given that, we're typically down around 10 versus our limit of 60. And we do look at that as, knowing that there could be periods of, non-normal operations, as was partially captured in the most recent source test. So, the source testing code does have requirements, but, we recognize things can happen, and that's why we've looked at sort of the conservative approach for the data we put forward in the modeling studies.
Okay. Yeah, again, thank you very much. We do have a committee member who has a question. If there's any other, non-committee members that have questions, let me know. I'd like to see some hands pop up here. Councillor Neal, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And I think maybe I got some partial answers from you, Andrew, and as well as from Ramesh, through you, Mr. Chair. But I guess where in the report is the evaluation requested by Clarington Council in Section 9 of their May 27th motion, which states, an evaluation of the Durham York Energy Center monitored programs and emission control technologies, as well as identification of improvements required to meet the commitment in the EFW business cases and host community agreement. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Do you want to take that one, or do you need some clarification on more on that question?
I can take a first initial attempt and then come back. So, we do look at emissions control technology and emissions monitoring technology on a regular basis. We did in a recent source test report, I believe it was last year, talk about how our facility approaches the best available technology standards set out in the European Union, and in terms of the technology and treatment capability we provide. We feel that given that what we're looking at in terms of just the optimization and the ongoing review, that we've fulfilled our obligations, and probably more than that, we'd have to start looking to legal to respond in closed session.
Well, partially, but not completely, but I'll leave it at that. Anyways, the other thing I have, I guess, and I don't know, we have experts in the room, I guess, but there was correspondence in regard to BBC News article titled "Burning Rubbish Now UK's Dirtiest Form of Power."
Through the chair, I can take that one. So when you looked at the methodology that they utilized, it was fairly simplistic. They simply took the emissions from a plant and divided it by the amount of power it was producing. I saw two major issues with that and how they looked at it. So first off, when you're comparing EFW to other forms of power, you really need to look at the offset emissions from not putting that through a landfill. That there is a significant sort of emissions that you're offsetting and avoiding by doing this. The other thing I would notice, in particular with some of the natural gas in particular, when you start to look at the life cycle on that, there's more and more concerns being raised about how much of the emissions from that material actually comes out of the transportation and creation of that. I think I've seen numbers, to the tune of 50%. So, really, in our analysis and the analysis that's typically done within, industry, you look at the full life cycle. So just looking at sort of the, emissions divided by power, there's nothing necessarily incorrect with how they've done it. It's just a little bit overly simplistic compared to how things are typically approached nowadays.
Okay, and that brings up a good point, Mr. Chair. What is the remaining life cycle of this EFW?
So our initial contract was for 20 years. So we obtained commercial operation in early 2016. So we're about year 8, 9. The initial contract is for 20 years. And we do have 2 optional extensions with the existing operator. These facilities do undergo, regular maintenance and regular scheduled shutdowns for improvements and component replacement on a kind of per component life cycle basis. But overall, the intent of our, the initial contract was that, whether or not we go forward past the 20 years, the owners would receive a facility that came back with an extra 5 years of life remaining in that facility in terms of large ticket items coming up on their replacement. Just if I can do a little bit more clarity, so things like the turbine can get taken down every 5 to 7 years for rebuilds. Baghouse cells get replaced 4 to 5, depending on how they look, and various components in the plant get replaced on various schedules. So the plant is sort of consistently being renewed, but our initial contract term is 20 years, and there's some optional extensions in there.
So what year are we talking?
It would be about 2036. Would be the
2036?
would be the initial expiry of the initial contract.
All right, and just in regards to that, Mr. Chair, what about the bottom ash? Where's that going now? I didn't find it in the report. Maybe I missed it.
So bottom ash disposal is the responsibility of the contractor. Right now, they're taking advantage of their contracts through a number of facilities, and it's being shipped to Modern Landfill in New York.
All right.
Fly ash is going to, I believe it's Walker in close to Niagara Falls.
Okay, and, oh, there was something else. I hate to bring this up again, but is Clarington going to get a direct response to everything that's been asked?
I think the intent would be to forward a copy of
Everything
the
that,
discussion today and the report today onto them.
so they're going to get everything that they've requested?
Again, it would be up to, as Mayor Foster mentioned, up to them to decide if they are comfortable with everything that was responded, but our intent is that we've responded to their concerns.
Okay, so the answer that you're giving is you've responded to them already, and
It would be, not yet, it would be following today's, following today's discussion.
okay, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, just for clarification, Councillor Neal, you said on your first question, you said that you didn't completely answer my question, but I'll move on. Do you want to just, again, we have an opportunity today to answer every possible question with the right people in the room. I want to make sure that anyone who leaves this meeting says, I had every possible question answered. So I'd like you to just make sure that you got the answer, a complete answer to your satisfaction.
Well, I circled back, and my last question pretty well was that.
Okay, again, I just don't want
And
any.
if it's up to the mayor of Clarington, if he's happy with it, as well as every member of their council, and I see there's a local member of council sitting here today listening to everything in person, so if they're all happy with it along with the mayor, I know we have this strong mayor thing going on, so I mean, that can be overruled or whatever, and I understand all that, and that's out of our hands, that's a provincial, something that's been delegated by the province, that's fine and dandy, but as long as everybody is, like Councillor Anderson and he's the one who pulled this correspondence, it just wasn't me, So, I mean, I just circled back with that final question.
Okay, fair enough.
And-
Again, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I appreciate you clarifying with that, Mr. Chair, because we spent a lot of time on this today, and like I say, like myself, I'm worried about South Oshawa, as well as probably the majority of my council are back in Oshawa too, So, I mean, I know where Clarington's from, but I'm also worried about that Lake Shore too, and I always have with this incinerator, but thank you.
Okay. Just an additional question, if you don't mind, and I know probably half the people are getting tired of this, but there are people that are against this. Some of those people sit on our council and have never been supportive of this way of dealing with our waste. Do you think, in your opinion, you've spent hours and hours and hours answering questions, do you think no matter what information we give people, they will ever be happy that this council, this government chose the approach of going EFW versus landfill?
Respectfully, I think I'm going to decline to answer that question. I think that's up to the individuals.
Fair enough, and that's fair. I appreciate it. We have another question. Mayor Watton, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll just keep it short and sweet. Though I direct this to you, Andrew. In your comments earlier, you said some of the information was hard for the public to understand. My only question is, can it be simplified?
So we do, in our reports, do try and get it down to, I think our target is at grade 5 level. And that's where we sit with, the information we release. There are, when you get into operational details and sampling frequencies and averaging periods, I have to start speaking a little bit too technically for a high level overview. But where there are more detailed concerns and questions, we staff do make themselves available. We have had open houses, and certainly we do receive inquiries and questions and host tours at the facility to help answer some of those questions.
Okay, because my feeling is if it were simpler, perhaps we wouldn't have as many questions as we do. And if I may, Mr. Chair, just one further question. On 3.1, it speaks to, it says the drivers have remained the same for the 2019 assumptions. And I only query this is, if the drivers are the same, have the assumptions been reviewed?
So I think the drivers are there, certainly in terms of if you look at population growth projections, pre-COVID and even, coming into this year and the housing commitments, we've seen some stops and starts and things haven't necessarily been on the intended track. That being said, I think we are continuing in that population growth direction, and that's why we're looking to put in the capacity in place to support that growth. But the underlying assumptions in terms of relative contract values and things like that do still hold. Just the specific numbers have changed with inflation and things that have gone on.
Thank you. That's my only other question. Thanks.
Okay, I don't see any additional hands. We do have a motion on the floor. Can you remind me who the mover and seconder was? Okay. Okay. All in favor? Oh, let's do a recorded vote. Thanks.
Councillor Yamada, looking for your vote.
So it's WR7.
Want to read. Usually
Oh.
it's up there. I've seen in the past, so.
It is a receive, is what the motion is, just to be clear. Okay, so it is carried. Thank you. All right, folks, do we want to take maybe a 10-minute break and come back? Okay, seconded by Chair Henry. All in favor? That's carried. Thanks. Okay, let's call this meeting back to order. We'll do another roll call. Okay, so we still have quorum, which is fantastic. Let's jump to report number 2024 WR8. This is the sole source for the Miller waste for multi-res. Okay, moved, seconded, all in favor? Any opposed? Oh, everyone's in favor? No, none opposed? A quarter vote. Okay, just because I saw mixed hands.
Dealing with a constituency matter?
Yeah, she told me that
So,
as well.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Just wanted you to
and
know.
that's noted with the clerk.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, that is carried and unanimous, which is great. And then we are into the works portion 8.1A. This is in regards to sidewalks on Ritson Road. Councilor Marion Pietri, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Not a problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really important issue. I know that at the city, I've been working on this with Councillor Neal, as well as Mayor Carter and Commissioner Jagannathan, as well as our Commissioner Anthony Ambra, and it's taken on a very positive direction because obviously, as you know, I just wanted to speak to it before I ask some questions. It may be counterintuitive, but I have some experience on the file and found that the area is one that requires a great deal of attention for two reasons. Obviously, the growth, and then the second, the most obvious, is the timing of the infrastructure. And in a perfect world, we'd have all the sidewalks and all the roads built out to the maximum capacity in order to facilitate all of the growth. But as you know, there's a process that we're undergoing. And so having taken on this file with both commissioners and working with Councillor Neal, as well as my councillor colleagues in the city of Oshawa at the local level, as well as the mayor, we've understood that there's an expansion requirement for the road. And as such, the sidewalks are going to be a part of that equation. So what we've been very careful of on behalf of taxpayers, for the obvious reasons, safety comes first, but the dollars and cents need to be put into the budget. And as a result, we have to design the stuff. And so expanding the road would require us to rip up the sidewalks if we put them in prematurely. So there is an opportunity, I understand, through you, Chair, to the Commissioner, because I understand that we're moving towards identifying permanent locations for these sidewalks to finally be installed, because in my opinion, it should have happened a long time ago. But I'm not going to speak to how the site plan was originally approved. What we're doing now at the city is looking at where we can install sidewalks as the site plan is being approved, so that you have this infrastructure in place before some of the subdivisions open. And that wasn't a practice in the past for different reasons. And we've really gone towards optimizing and streamlining that process and making sure that we don't have to have these discussions and have these pressures after the fact. Now, we can't go back to that point, but we are going to move forward. And although I appreciate the petition very much, the work is already being done. So if I could just allow, through you to the Commissioner, just to respond to some of the work that we're doing, because it doesn't happen overnight. We're going to be activating this in a period of time with the budget and the coordination of both the road expansion and the permanent locations that are required to be able to ensure that this doesn't get then ripped up and cause us to do it all over again.
Yeah, through the chair, yeah. I can confirm I have been in discussion with my counterpart in Oshawa, Anthony Ambra, earlier today and yesterday as well. I understand they are advancing some design for a sidewalk or a walk path.
Sure.
In advance of the region's widening, which is at least 3-4 years away.
Yep.
To the extent possible to put it in a location where there's no throwaway cost. Or the bottom line is we've offered to collaborate with the city on their goals.
Okay. So just through you, Chair, to the Commissioner, the previous apprehensions were that if we expanded the road, then the sidewalks get ripped up. But I'm hearing that our intention to install the sidewalks as a city, and I'm saying our, because that's what we would like to do, in a permanent location that is not affected by the road expansion is something that we're working with you on. Is that correct?
Yeah, I haven't seen the latest design, but that is what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, so there is no problem from the region standpoint. You're going to look at those designs, and we're going to be able to move forward with permanent locations. Is that something that I can take from this?
If I may refer to Mr. G, like who has been working a little closely
Sure.
with Bob.
Yeah, through the chair. It's always the desire to have permanent locations where that's feasible to do so. It's not always the case, however. So in seeing some of the design that the city has produced to date, there's certainly areas that would not be reusable. So that's temporary sidewalk that's being proposed. It's just for various reasons. It may be issues with property, utilities, grading trees, there's a lot of issues potentially. So certainly we'll try and definitely work together to come up with permanent locations, but just be aware that there'll be sections that won't be permanent.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to get to as well. The challenge is that as much as we want to get to the point where we install these and they stay, and we don't have to go and rip them up and pay for them all over again, this design, consideration is real. We're having to work with you as a city and the region to ensure that, we're not duplicating and costing, taxpayers a ton of money where, we can otherwise optimize and do without. Can I just ask, you'll continue to work through you, Mr. Chair, with the city to ensure that we can get to the point where we establish this is the best possible design for the permanent sidewalks so that we can advance them as quickly as possible? Because again, I just wanted to say, I'm going to preface this, I wish this had happened when the actual development was site plan approved. We wouldn't be talking about this, but it didn't. So now we're challenged with having to deal with the safety concerns, which are my principal issue and that of Councillor Neal and others that are dealing on the file. I know that you at this staff level, at the region as well as the city, have the same, considerations and are working hard. Can we continue to work on that path to establish the best possible solution?
Most definitely. That would definitely be the goal, and we will definitely try and do that for sure.
Okay, much appreciated. I may have something else to add to this later, but I'll cede the floor to you. I'll surrender the floor to you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. There's nothing on the floor. So just, we don't have anything on the floor here. So just you're going to move it, and it's moved to receive, I think is what's the suggestion. Do you want to give us a second on that? Okay, sounds good. All right, so seconded by Councillor Marin Pietri. Councillor Neal, go ahead. After I hit the button, there you go.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I pulled this because I saw it on there when I was going through when I first got the CIP. Now, what I've heard today, is there any way I can get something like that in writing and I can get back to the I don't know who, I don't know personally who the resident is who took the signatures, but if I can get an explanation in writing back to them, then I'd appreciate it somehow.
Yeah, so I think because the city's put in sidewalks,
Yeah.
we know the region doesn't. The city doesn't want to build a sidewalk twice, obviously, because that's not a good use of tax dollars.
No.
I would go to your internal public works at the city of Oshawa to get that letter, because it's their project, and they are making the decision when to build this. And again, they're making the responsible choice, which is not building a sidewalk that will be ripped up right away. So I think it's really their comms, not ours, would be my feeling.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that I have all the, what I heard today somehow in some kind of document that I can take. I don't know if our commissioners listening to this, I tried to get hold of them yesterday or whatever, and I wasn't able to. So talk with them about it. So I already pulled this. So, I mean, it affects you know what, I'm not going to talk about what they got planned for Ritson Road. I suppose people know. And there's missing infrastructure there, so.
Just, again, you've
Yeah.
been doing this job way longer than I have, but what I always do is when I want to
Yep.
communicate what happened to council to a resident, I just send the video to them, but that's what I do.
Yeah, it's just that I saw it on the CIP. I saw it on the CIP, so I thought I'd better pull it because it was in my ward.
Makes
Like,
sense.
that's all I'm asking, like. Anyways, thank you.
No problem. Tito, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I just want to caution us because I think that it's important for us to recognize that if we're, moving in the positive direction, which in past may not have been there, where we were kind of, dug our heels in and said, listen, we're not going to look at your design unless the expansion of the road is being, dealt with in tandem, which makes sense. But in this case, we're looking in a positive, spirit of collaboration to see where we can work on, advancing this. I'm going to go back to my initial comments, which were, if at the time, when the site plan was being dealt with, we had these conversations about design before the roads, were even considered, before the houses were built, maybe we wouldn't be here talking about this. But we have to be very careful as to, which direction we point our fingers, because site plan is something within the city's control. And, anyone involved in the council process with respect to site plan at the time could have flagged this and said, listen, I want sidewalks first, organized the votes, and got the region to be able to sort of, collaborate. Now, I'm not going to, comment as to whether the spirit of collaboration was there or not before. I don't know. But I do know that we're being very careful now to connect with works at the region through our commissioner and our excellent staff, through you, Mr. Chair, to ensure that these conversations in future don't continue to, weigh us down. And I think that having a different strategy, looking at site plans in that way, at least from our standpoint at the city, whether it's successful or not, we're definitely much more careful and aggressive about advancing infrastructure that is health and safety related for residents and neighborhoods before they're even built. So I want to thank staff through you for working with our staff in that spirit of, positive collaboration, because that's how we resolve our issues.
Okay, so we don't have it. Oh, we don't have any additional speakers right now. No questions or comments? All in favor? Okay, sure.
Looking online for Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Mulcahy.
Okay, so that has been dealt with and is carried. We're now at 8.2A. This is report number 2024 W23 in regards to declaration of land surplus. Oh, and there's an amendment. Just a second. Do you have it handy? Okay, so can I get a mover and a seconder for that? Okay, and then there isn't, as seconder is, okay, seconder, Councillor Crawford. Okay, all right, so we just need a quick amendment. The recommendations, they actually conflict each other. So one is it's worth 500K, I think. The other is saying we're going to renegotiate a rate. So the amendment is on the screen. We're going to just strike through item D, which says, okay, move the amendment. Seconded by Councillor Crawford? Yes. Any questions on the amendment? I think it's on the screen now. It was just, it conflicted with the one ahead of it and the truth. Okay. All in favor of the amendment to start with? And then all in favor of the motion? And that is carried. Okay. All right, so now we are into a confidential report. Do we want to move it and second it, or do we want to move into camera? Move by, okay, so we're going to have to go into camera, or is it a question that we can do out? All right, fair enough. So, motion to move into camera. Just a second. I have to read all this? What do I say again, this?
Get the motion to move into camera.
Okay, so I'll get a motion to move into camera, moved by Councillor Crawford, seconded by Councillor Marion Pietri. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, and then please be advised, the committee will now meet in closed session in accordance to subsection 239-2 of the Municipal Act to consider a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land. We just need a couple minutes to move into camera. No problem. Totally makes sense. Thank you, sir.
roll call.
Okay, sounds good. So we are now out of camera. Do you want me to do this before the roll call?
We'll do the roll call first.
Okay, so we're going to do another roll call. Okay, sounds good. Okay, just so everyone's aware, committee met in closed session to consider matters it is permitted to do so under the Municipal Act and as listed on today's committee agenda. The following items were considered during the closed session and no decisions were made. All right. Can I get a mover and seconder for the motion? Moved by Councillor Marin Pietri, seconded by Councillor Yamada. Any questions or comments on that? And a recorded vote. Okay, all in favor? Oh, just a second. We're doing the recorded vote now. There we go. Thank you. Oh, right. So is there any other business? All right. The date of our next meeting is Wednesday, December the 4th at 9:30. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Matted, seconded by Councillor Crawford. Thank you very much.